Today's our second session on cultural humility with our HSC colleagues. And I have a whole new set of people. And so you're going to be hearing some interesting talks. I'm going to be learning too while we're doing this. I wanted to introduce the panel. For those of you who don't know me or who were not present, I guess, for the first session, I'm Alberta Kong. I'm a professor of pediatrics and I'm the division chief of adolescent medicine. And today I've got Dr. Fang, who is a professor of pharmaceutical sciences in the College of Pharmacy. He was born in 1971 in Hunan Province, China. He completed a PhD in inorganic chemistry at Nanjing University in 1998 and was a China Science Foundation postdoctoral fellow at Zhejiang University. Subsequently, he worked with Professor John H. Enemark at the University of Arizona as a postdoctoral researcher and as a research scientist. And since 2006, he has been a faculty with the College of Pharmacy at the University of New Mexico. He was promoted to full professor in 2019. His present research interests are in bioinorganic chemistry and spectroscopy with an emphasis on nitric oxide synthase enzymes. He has published 98 articles in premier international journals. He is recipient of several prestigious awards that include the William M. Hadley Distinguished Scholar Award, UNM College of Pharmacy P1 Faculty Appreciation Award, and Young Investigator Award at the Gordon Research Conference on nitric oxide back in 2007. He is also actively engaged in community services and serves as the president of the Association of Chinese American Engineers and Scientists of New Mexico. That was in 2018, and was also the principal of New Mexico Chinese School of Arts and Languages. Wow, he's been busy. And then I also have Dr. Chen Jin Parajon. She is an assistant professor and executive director of the Office of Community Health. She is with the Department of Family and Community Medicine, and she's right now on leave because she's serving as the New Mexico Department of Health Deputy Cabinet Secretary of Health. I have also Dr. Betty Chang, who is a professor and executive vice chair of internal medicine and the vice chair for clinical operations and inpatient services in the Department of Internal Medicine. Dr. Chang graduated medical school at McGill University, did her internal medicine residency at Evanston Hospital, and pulmonary and critical care fellowship at Johns Hopkins University, where she also completed a PhD in clinical study design. She is the former program director for internal medicine residency program and the former associate dean for graduate medical education. And last, I have also Joyce Pang, who is a general surgery resident and also a learning environment educational fellow. So we have 4 panelists with us today. And what I'm going to do, like I did in the last session, is review over what cultural humility is. And Meg is going to help me advance the slides. So I found this actually on the Office of Victim Services and Justice Grants, and I thought it was eloquently written, and I couldn't have done any better. So I'm going to just read it and let us review it. So what is cultural humility?
And so over the course of this past
and respectful attitude toward individuals of other cultures that pushes one to challenge cultural biases, realize we cannot possibly know everything about our cultures, and approach learning about other cultures as a lifelong goal and process. It is to maintain a willingness to suspend what you know or what you think you know about a person based on generalizations about their culture. Rather, what you learn about a person's culture stems from being open to what they themselves have determined is their personal expression of their heritage and culture. Those who practice cultural humility work to increase their self-awareness of their own biases and perceptions and engage in a lifelong self-reflection process about how to put these aside and learn from others. So next slide, Meg. I just want to differentiate. I think a lot of us have gone through cultural competency training, but I want to differentiate the two, the cultural competence versus cultural humility. And cultural competence is loosely defined as the ability to engage knowledgeably with people across cultures. But that assumes that there is a mastery of that skill, right? Learning competency. So cultural humility includes cultural competence, but it takes it a little further. You know, there's an active commitment to lifelong learning and really critically self-reflection. And then it also is pushing you to recognize and challenge power imbalances so that we can have respectful partnerships in discussions, and also a commitment to pursuit of institutional accountability. Next slide. So today our panelists, they're going to talk a little bit about their Asian identity and then how they or their grandparents or their parents came to the United States, and a little bit about the culture as it relates to cultural humility that would help others in better service delivery and practice. And then they'll also share some tips on how to work better with people in their culture in terms of communication. So for the audience, what I like you guys to do today is practice that lifelong learning and the critical self-reflection. Think about your own cultural beliefs and values. You know, are they different? Are they similar to what you're hearing? And then also be aware about your personal biases and assumptions. We all have them, and sometimes they, you know, they're unconscious biases, but it's to recognize them. And then also really to then listen to the stories and realize there are historical realities that we have to be sensitive of and also aware of. So I'm going to pass this on to our first speaker, and that is Dr. Jim Fang.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Kong, for the nice introduction. So actually, you already talked about what I really want to talk on this slide. But anyway, so I just want to actually, you know, start by actually identifying myself. Actually, I am a Chinese from mainland China. So I came to this country in 2000 as a postdoc. And so as you can see, actually, I grew up in China. So basically, we moved to to United States when I was 29 years old. So actually, you know, as you can see, I finished almost all of my education training in China. And so it was quite a challenge when I first came to this country, because as you can imagine, you know, I was in a totally different culture and a country, as you can see here. So, I still remember I did encounter some cultural shock at the beginning, but, you know, I learned very fast. And so can you actually go to the next slide, please? Thank you. The next slide. Okay, so I really want to also share a little bit about our Chinese culture. Actually, as you know, that the Chinese regard humility as a virtue. So, you know, most Chinese still would love to be praised, but they probably will not say thank you in public. That's actually in our blood. So, you know, we don't like to brag ourselves too much in public. And and another point I want to make here is that, you know, we really care more about our family than ourselves. So our society is more toward collectiveness. So as you probably have heard a lot about that, you know, many Chinese family, when they first come to this country, you know, they may not have a very good job, but, you know, they will do their best to support their kids, to support their children's education. And then the second generation, many of them will become a doctor, become a PhD, become a scientist, an engineer. So that's what actually, you know, a very, as I view that as I really treasure this kind of culture, because we really want to support our family members, and we want our future generation and our children to do their best to reach their highest potential. So, you know, and I know that many Chinese family here, they even promise that when their kids graduate from college, they will not own any loan. I don't know if I can do it or not, but, you know, that's what many Chinese families are doing here. So that's just to show their their devotion to their family. So that's a little about the Chinese culture. And about one tip for communication when working with Chinese culture. So as you can see, actually, I spent my whole career in academia. So I would like to share some of my experience in academia as a faculty. So, in many times, actually, I was dinged. Actually, I was many times, some people say, hey, Jim, you may, I feel that you don't care, or, you don't speak up in meetings, or you don't ask questions at conferences. And it seems like, you are not engaged. And, maybe they do not say that you are incompetent, but I can sense that. But anyway, what I want to share is that we may be quiet in those public events. However, we just want to listen to what other people say about first. Then we will take the information in and synthesize, and then we will form our own point of view. Then we will share our thoughts on the issues. So I think, when you would talk to a Chinese in those situations, probably you could be more patient, maybe give the individual more time, and also perhaps you could follow up a little bit later just about, hey, what he or she would think about this. And, we do care about the department. We do care about the college and health science center. And we may be just a little bit quiet, but as you can see that, we work very hard. We are a very good team player. And, and sometimes we just may need some guidance because, we, as the first generation, we may not have a role model about where and how and what we can accomplish. So we just need some guidance. And I feel that, if you could, actually really be more patient, just be more positive, and also think about, yes, this Chinese individual may not be as vocal as us. However, he or she could actually contribute, perhaps, maybe in thinking about in a more strategic way, and also may think about, how he or she can help write up, some plans, right, to summarize some of the findings. Anyway, so I think, this awareness about perhaps our manner, I don't think our quiet manner is bad. It's just different. I hope that, sharing this tip in communicating with your Chinese colleague would be beneficial in the future. So I will stop and I will pass this on to our next panelist, Dr. Cheng.
So our next speaker is Dr. Chen Jin Huang. And I see her right now.
Okay, great. Hi. Oh, sorry, I was trying to can you hear me? Okay, great. Hi. So, my name is Laura Chen Jin Huang, and my family's from Taiwan. So like kind of many immigrants to the United States, my parents actually came in 1966, right after the Immigration and Nationality Act that allowed more Asians to immigrate to the United States. I think it's really important to remember that as Asians, historically, there was the Asian Exclusion Act that limited the number of Asians to come into the country. And so that history kind of discrimination is really kind of, I don't know, I think it's very prominent at least in our family, because when we first moved, I guess my parents first moved to the States, there weren't a lot of Asians in our neighborhood. So as children, we often got like people would throw rocks at us, and people would say stuff like, hey, you're not from this country, you're from Pearl Harbor. Like, oh, you bombed Pearl Harbor? That was a good one. Like, people always said that to us when we were growing up. They would call us names. And I think just that growing up when there weren't a lot of Asians around was, really harming, because like we were children back then, and we spoke perfect English because we were born in the United States. But then people would be like, oh, your English is so good. And, I didn't see like my white friends having that experience, like even though their parents were immigrants, right? Like no one says to like a white immigrant family, like second generation person, oh, your English is so good. So I don't know, that kind of feeling of being the other all the time was really hard on us, I think, growing up. And then, then you'd always think like, oh, well, if I go back to Taiwan, that would actually make it better because that's where I'm from. So then we'd go back to Taiwan in the summers, like my family would, and then they'd be like, oh, you're so white, like you can't even speak Taiwanese well, which is like our native language. And so it was kind of this weird place that you lived in. Like you thought, oh, well, in Taiwan, they'll accept me as, not as someone there, but then they'd be like, no, you're so American, you're so white. So it was kind of a weird experience growing up, and just kind of feeling like you didn't belong in any culture because you were kind of in between cultures. But also I think it was awesome growing up because the culture, our Taiwanese culture, is very friendly. It's an island. Taiwan is an island, so it's a very friendly place. And I think people think that all Asians are alike, but like every Asian culture, there's so many different kinds of Asians, right? So Taiwanese people, just as a general rule, like, because it's an island, they're like super friendly. And, a lot of us are dark colors because, I don't know, it's like an island. But they really like people to be white colored. So like growing up, my parents would always be like, why are you so dark? Like, get out of the sun, wear sunscreen and wear a hat. Don't get so dark. So like even within Asian culture, I think there's a lot of like discrimination within Asian. Like it's always better to be white than dark. And like we're kind of dark in my family. So that made me realize that even within a culture, there's a lot of discrimination. I grew up in, like I said, in Maryland, and then I came here for medical school and residency, and to do my public health here as well. And it was interesting because that made me realize too that a lot of people thought I was Native American or Korean. I think at the time when I was doing my med school here, there are a lot of people who were, I just made me realize just like how you look makes people think a certain thing about you. But and so I guess just something to remember about Asians, I think, is just that we're so different. We're not all one mono group of people. And I think that's an important piece to what we're all about. I think another thing is that I don't know if other people had this experience, but my parents really, really wanted me to be a doctor. And I was always like, why is that like all you care about, And my dad would always say like, well, it's because racism is so high here that I want you to have a job that like people would respect you and that you could just do a private practice so you wouldn't have to worry about people discriminating against you. So I think sometimes people think, oh, like all Asians care about is like that their kids are doctors or some kind of thing like that. But for my parents, it was like how do you survive in a country that like is oftentimes racist to Asians as well. So that's a part of my upbringing. I think that like was previously shared is that family is really important in our culture. And you'll do everything for your kids or you'll do everything for your parents. So like a lot of times people will be like, oh my God, why are you living with your parents? And I was like, well, of course I'm going to live with my parents. Like I have to take care of them, and that's like really strong in our culture. And and so that's kind of another cultural thing. And then I think one of the tips for communication, I think, is for being Asian is that like I said, relationships is such an important thing, especially in Taiwanese culture. it's all about relationships and your networks and how you work with other people. So I think that for me, the way I have worked with people is kind of the way my father explained everything, is that everything had a quote. Like he literally, I think he memorized every single quote of Lao Tzu. So like one thing that he always shared with me about how to work with people in your job is he would always say, go to the people, live with them, learn from them, love them, start with what they know, build with what they have. But with the best leaders, when the work is done, the task is accomplished, the people will say, we have done it ourselves. And I think that really expresses a lot of the leadership style that my parents raised us by, and also a lot of the leadership that I grew up with is leadership that's really collaborative. And like, it's not that we don't, like, it's not a leadership style that really says like, hey, I'm the one, it's really, we're the one. And it's very collaborative. And sometimes that might not be as seen as, desirable by like US standards, but that's kind of a cultural thing. And so for me, I think there is a lot of like, not a lack of leadership. I think not as many Asians get into leadership positions. If you look at, if you look at the, just the overall, like how many Asians are in leadership positions. And it may be because sometimes people think, oh, well, maybe they're not putting themselves out there, but that doesn't mean that we can't lead or we can't, organize things and work with a team. We're a different kind of leader. Maybe if you're coming, and I think knowing that we can support different kind of diverse leadership styles in an institution is really important. And I think that's kind of what I think is like, yeah, give agents a chance. Sometimes, we are maybe more quiet, or maybe we might seem to be too nice or something like that. But really, we should be judged by like what we do in our skill set and what we're able to accomplish. And diversity in leadership positions is really important, I think. So that's my sharing. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I hear so many things that I identify with. It's just super interesting, even for me listening, like, oh yeah, that completely fits my family too. So thank you so much. I am going to now pass it off to Dr. Betty Chang.
Hi, I'm Betty Chang. I identify as an American, although I'm a Chinese American dyslexic woman. And I say that because, let me start with the story of how my family got to the United States. My grandfather was a vice principal of a magnet school in China. And towards the end of the Communist Revolution, it was quite obvious the communists were winning. He, as a semi-government official, realized that he had to leave China. He gathered up all of the teachers and the students who were now orphaned from the war, got them onto ships and took them over to Taiwan. And then once in Taiwan, he inadvertently found himself to be the guardian of about 6,000 children between the ages of 6 and 16. Shortly after arriving, the government came to him and said, we would like to take all the children and conscript them into the army because we need some new recruits. And he told the government officials, I was charged with the education of these children. I can't allow, I need to ensure that they still get educated. So they bargained, and the bargain was that the children from 11 to 16 would serve half the day in the military and the other half the day learning. And the children from 6 to 11 would stay in school. This did not make the government very happy. And a few months later, he was arrested for high treason and executed. So my father's family lived under house arrest for the better part of 10 years. And even when they were no longer under house arrest, government officials would stop by on a regular basis to check up on them. My grandmother, realizing that there was no future in China for her children, staged a sit-in at the government officials' offices to ensure that her children got out of Taiwan. So my father arrived in the United States in 1964 with $100, an admission ticket to Utah State University, and a phone number of a friend, knowing that there was absolutely no going home. I don't have an allegiance to Taiwan or China because from the minute my dad arrived, we were committed to being an American. So I grew up in Salt Lake City, Utah, for the most part, although we lived in rural Utah for a number of years. And up until I was 7 or 8, I was the only minority child in a very blonde school. My father said he could drive by the school and find me in a sea of children because I'd be the only child with dark hair. And so, the drive to assimilate and be as American as possible was always forefront in my upbringing. I always tell the story that my family always has turkey on Thanksgiving. My mom and dad hate turkey. But the reason why they have turkey every Thanksgiving is at some point in my childhood, that post-Thanksgiving essay where you write about what you did for Thanksgiving, I must have written something inappropriate because my mother got a phone call from the school that said, we have this special program to give turkeys to families that can't afford turkey. And my mother was appalled. And so after that, we had turkey every year. And I finally let go of this tradition when I was in my mid-40s because, this is just, we have to be an American family. So we're going to have turkey, even though that nobody eats the turkey. I say that I'm dyslexic because I think a lot of my childhood experiences were augmented. I was a dyslexic child and slow to read, and my teacher's response to my slowness was amplified by the fact that I wasn't white. And so I was deemed irrecoverable and sent to special education, where the special education teachers would work with me and realize that I was really quite capable of teaching the other children and would send me back to regular ed. And I shuttled back and forth for a number of years before someone decided that I was worthy and helped me learn to read. Those experiences have really driven me. And people say, oh, that's really terrible. No, it isn't terrible because people telling me that I can't do things is the reason why that I've been successful over the years. My guidance counselor telling me that I shouldn't apply to such difficult schools if I was just going to get married and have children is the reason that I applied to MIT and Harvard and Yale and Princeton and ended up going to MIT. So I think a lot of these, negative experiences really drive us to be successful. And I don't regret my childhood, even though it wasn't all roses. I think the thing that I want to point out is that just because I look Chinese and I am Chinese doesn't mean that I have a devoted allegiance to China. I'm an American. When I watch the Olympics, I root for the Americans. I think the understanding that just because I may look a certain way doesn't mean I have allegiances different. I think the other lesson, I think everyone's already said, just because I'm a polite human being doesn't mean that I'm stupid. I learned that in fellowship, that because I was polite to people and I was willing to listen to their thoughts, they didn't think I was a very smart person, and I had to prove myself. I don't know if I had to prove myself more than someone who was white, but I definitely always felt that I had something to prove to people.
Thank you, Dr. Chang. I think this will be an interesting discussion because I do think there's a lot of trauma that I think some of us have gone through during our experience growing up in the US. And I do think that really does shape who we are. So thank you for sharing that personal history. My last panelist is Dr. Joyce Payne. So I will let Dr. Payne take it away.
Thank you, Dr. Kong, and thank you so much for organizing this panel. I've learned so much from the panelists too, and I can really reflect on everything that everyone has said already. But a little bit about myself. So my parents actually immigrated here as graduate students. So they didn't know each other, but actually met in graduate school in Minnesota. My dad is from China and my mom is from Taiwan. So basically from two different countries, and actually met here in the US. And I wasn't born, I was born in California, in Oakland, and I grew up in Las Vegas, Nevada for the majority of my life. And so I consider myself a first generation Chinese, Taiwanese American. I think the important things to note are the fact that I, like Dr. Chang, have never been to China. I've lived in the United States all my life. And thinking back on it, it wasn't until I actually got a little bit older before I thought back on all these kind of little microaggressions or little racist events that happened to me during the course of my growing up. So for example, I was born in the US. I've never had an accent at all in my English. I learned English from watching TV from my parents who both spoke English. And yet I was enrolled in English as a second language as an elementary school student without any asking of my parents or any talking to me or even testing me. And my mom was furious. She almost pulled me out of that school because she was so angry that they had enrolled me in English as a second language course. And little things like that. For example, I was 10, I was sitting with my dad in the university cafeteria where he worked. And there was just a passerby that came by and just commented to us and was like, "Oh, your daughter's English is so great." And I remember my dad speaking up being like, "I hope it is. She grew up here and she has spoken English all her life." So little things like that. And then Meg, actually, if you could bring up the slide one more time. Thanks. And so I think for me, from building upon what all the other panelists have said, I think a big thing is do not assume AAPI individuals are foreign born. I think that is a constant thing. And actually, it's the theory talked about if you look at Asian American studies about the perpetual foreigner. So anyone who has an Asian appearance is assumed to be foreign. So one of the most common things is that the question of, oh, where are you from? But where are you really from? And so this idea that if you are Asian appearing, you have to have been born somewhere else. There's no way you can be American. The other point I want to make is that API, even though we're often lumped together, if you think about it, that stands for Asian American Pacific Islander. Think about how many countries of origin that those groups come from. We're often lumped together in census when we're talked about in the media, when we're talked about in the news, but it's really not a monolithic group. Every culture, every ethnicity has a very different experience. And then because of that, there are stereotypes about AAPI success in the model minority myth, but those myths actually ignore large income and educational gaps in the AAPI community and also health disparities. And so this idea of all AAPI are successful, have great educational attainment, do really well in medicine and or law or high attaining in educational status, but that's not true between different AAPI communities. There are some communities that are very poorly represented in medicine, very poorly represented in higher education, and very poorly represented in higher economic status. And so those are the things I want people to think about. And really those stereotypes, they're really used to drive a wedge between AAPI identified individuals and other communities of color. It really downplays the effects of structural systemic racism, how they affect AAPI individuals, and it also minimizes anti-AAPI racism. So those are the things I want to kind of leave with. And I'll throw it back to Dr. Kong to finish up the panel.
Thank you so much, Dr. Pang. And we learned a lot from a lot of the things that you pointed out that I think, as a group of Asian Americans coming together to really voice that, there are so many different groups among the Asian culture. And Dr. Chang just chatted here, there's 46 Asian nations. So it'd be great. I think in the future, they're going to be having more of these heritage celebration of heritage months. And it would be great to just be able to get more of the Asian diaspora speaking at these events. I know the last one we had Dr. Lee, who is from Korea, and Dr. Nino Maya from Japan. Dang Vu is a medical student. He's from Vietnam, from Vietnamese. And here we have more of the Chinese and Taiwanese culture. But I don't know if the audience have noticed, in terms of the, because I've been noticing, even as I'm doing these sessions, I'm really learning from everybody, just like Dr. Pang was saying. But what I'm seeing is, there's really some generational differences, even in our culture. And I notice differences if we're actually not born in the US versus, the generations that have been born in the US. So that's been really interesting to me. And I think something Dr. Chen Jin Huang was mentioning is even within the culture, and I saw everybody's head nodding, that even the skin color, and I'm also darker because, from Hong Kong, we're from the South, so we're also darker. And so something that, Dr. Parajon was saying, it resonated with me, because there is prejudices even within our culture. And I think it's something that we all have to recognize, and it's difficult to talk about. I'm going to see if there's some questions on the chat here. If anybody has any questions, please chime in. So I thought, Dr. Chang, Dr. Pang, it was interesting that you were put into English as a second language, and you were born here. And then I thought it was really kind of funny, because I also learned English by watching TV. It was just one of the days I was like, oh, I actually understand what they're saying. And unfortunately, I actually was not put in English as a second language. I could have definitely used it, but I do think that really brings home a point that you were saying, that people really just, tend to classify you as being foreign. And here you were born in the US. Let me throw this out to, I guess, maybe Dr. Fang, who I think for you had to really assimilate more. But I think that really resonates even for the other, panel members, because even though you were born in the US, there was still a lot of assimilation that sound like had to, that you had to sort of endure during that time. But Dr. Fang, do you want to talk?
Yeah, well, I think, generations differ from generations. So China is really changing a lot. Even, after I left China in 2000, China is a totally different country now. Even I feel like, I don't know the country very well. So even actually I grew up there for almost like 30 years. So, actually for my 3 boys at home, we actually still speak with them in Chinese. So we want them to learn both Chinese and English. And they have been also in the ESL class, and we are totally fine with it. I think this is, it's a little bit different because of the time. I really want my children to know their roots about our Chinese culture. So that's why my oldest son, who is a freshman at UPenn right now, he actually finished 12 years of Chinese class. So basically, I took him to the Chinese school every Sunday. So, so I really hope that they know their root. I hope that they can actually speak Chinese. Maybe they cannot really write Chinese very well, but at least they can understand when they actually visit our families. We still have lots of families, connections, friends in China. So I hope that, they will cherish this culture. So to me, I think actually, actually to us, like as the first generation who actually moved to this country, basically around, or after 2000. And we actually, we are very proud of our Chinese culture. And I really hope that, the United States here and people over here actually, also, cherish or also appreciate the diversity here, because I just feel that, this world will be better if we have different type of people.
I think having gone to Chinese school many times in my life in various locations and places, what I always found kind of funny was that I don't feel comfortable in Chinese school any more than I felt comfortable in American school, because neither one was the right fit. And I think if there had been a Chinese school for American-born Chinese people who are really kind of more American, that would have been perfect. Yeah. Oftentimes I find myself having way more in common with children of immigrants, and they could be 15 versus people who are my age and more recently immigrated. Because again, it's an interesting thing to walk amongst your people and yet not really feel like they're your people.
Yeah, I can identify with that, Betty, because my Chinese is terrible. And so my parents didn't do as a good job as Dr. Fang is doing with his children. They didn't force me to, only speak Chinese, because I think, partly it was to help me assimilate so that my English would be better. So it wasn't, and I think, growing up for me was, they didn't want me to cause any problems, don't cause any conflict and don't stand out, because, that was how it was sort of surviving. And I did, like you, Dr. Cheng, also grew up where, not initially, but when I moved to Arizona, there was just maybe 3 of us in the whole school. And so that was, kids can be cruel at that time, but luckily they do grow up. So I understand some of that, that pain. I think that always carries, I think, with us, but also made us a lot stronger, I have to admit, get a much thicker skin. I think something, I think Dr. Parajon, I think many of us brought up is sort of, and I saw it's even a session on that, about getting put into positions or having the leadership think about you for positions. Because I do think sometimes we are so quiet that we tend to be overlooked for those leadership positions, because I do think a lot of those positions, people, tend to go to people who are very eloquent. And I wish sometimes I could be as eloquent as them. And I think I'm looking at Dr. Romero-Leggett, and she knows how much I actually dislike public speaking and having to push myself. She even found a moderator for me for one of the other sessions because she knew that I disliked it so much. But I want to, Dr. Chang, you've really risen up in the ranks too. But I think that is really hard. What are some, and same thing with Dr. Parajon, what are some suggestions you could give to leadership to really consider, even though maybe we're not as articulate, or how, what is it that could help us in terms of,
Yeah, no, I think that's a great question. I can't begin to tell you how many times people have mansplained me, and I think I get it more than the average woman because I'm an Asian woman. I thank God I have white hair now because people don't call me too young to do what I do. For most of my life, people are like, oh, you're not old enough. I was asked to have my orders co-signed as a 45-year-old attending at UNM because they thought I was the medical student. I I can't help the way I look. And somewhere, someday, someone has to believe that I'm old enough. So again, white hair is a huge benefit. But I think what we need to do is, you have to be a content expert and you have to work harder at being a content expert. And when you speak up as that content expert, people are more likely to take you seriously. I think the other thing is that you have to, it's a Chinese thing to wait to be asked before you put yourself out there. I think you have to put yourself out there before then and volunteer for things and speak up when people are asking for panel members or assistance with things, because it's too easy to get overlooked as an Asian American. I think it's even worse as an Asian American woman to get overlooked. Dr. Parajon, I'm sure you have some experiences that are probably similar.
Oh yeah, I think that's true. I agree with you. I think that oftentimes we are seen as, like I said, being too polite or too nice. And I think that if we could just be seen for, I agree that my dad always said you have to work twice as hard as an Asian, to be noticed, to be seen for what you do. I don't know. It would be different if I was white. I don't know because I never was white, but it just seems like you do have to, I think in our work ethic anyways, like the way my parents brought us up was to work hard and like really serve the people. I did grow up in a very like service oriented family, like, oh, let's go and volunteer this weekend and help out the older people, or whatever. Like my dad literally, he had people come over our house at any time, like just anyone was sick, like come over, And so I think we had that in our blood anyways, just to, growing up like that to serve our communities. But I do think that oftentimes that, I just think that I wish Asians would not get overlooked for leadership positions because of the way we do our leadership style, which I think is just from our culture, like,
I have another question here from the panel. What are the thoughts of your specific culture on the role of females in society? That kind of relates to a little bit about what we were discussing.
Yeah, my mom still tells me that I need to take better care of my family, which I always think is funny because my mom is also the one who pushed me to be a doctor, failing to realize that as a doctor, I'm going to be at work a lot. There's a tension that, as a woman, as an Asian woman, you need to take care of your family more so than if you were an Asian man. It's kind of a standing joke amongst all of my Asian female friends.
Yeah, you're expected to take care of everybody, right? And I think that like bleeds over to your work too. So I don't know. I just think that as Asian women, you're trained to take care of other people, and you're not trained to take care of yourself, right? Like I just see my mom; she's like works till like really late to make sure everyone's fed, like, so I see myself doing that, I'm like, I worked all day, but I'm still going to make dinner for the kids and do all the special foods for them. So I think that it's I don't know. I think it's a lot of work to be an Asian woman.
I'm laughing because, my mom tells me, you have children now, you need to come home. And she was a nurse who actually came to the US for the first 7 years and had my grandparents take care of me. And I never quite understood that. So I'm laughing because I'm hearing so many similarities of growing up with what you guys are saying too. There are some comments in here, and I'm just going to read some of these in the chat. This is from Vanessa Will. She also had friends experience that some school systems automatically put their kids into ESL class if their files show that they have a non-English speaking parent at home. That's interesting. No matter what the child's actual proficiency in English is. Yeah, so yes, it's obviously a huge problematic assumption, but it has also happened to kids of a friend of hers who is married to a man from Germany who speaks German at home. And then
It is not uncommon for Asian children to translate for their parents. And those children could have perfectly, American English, but that doesn't mean necessarily that the parents have perfect English.
yeah, sometimes too, there may be an expectation to translate and maybe the kid can't actually do it. Because I think if you had me translate for, not my parents, but if you had me translate, that would be a problem. I don't think I could understand everything. And then I have one from Dr. Belmonte too. He's having some internet connection problem that's unstable. So he's gonna type this instead. So a generalization, but not unfounded, is what Western medicine values confident go-getters who are very individually oriented. I've seen that residents who do not fit that mold can prompt evaluations of residents such as quiet, not sure of their medical knowledge, needs to be more assertive. In the past, I have found it very important to build these students up. One, not diminishing their own values. Two, having them explore their own leadership values. Three, explicitly providing space for them to lead with their values. This typically leads to these students performing really well because they were excellent to begin with and putting to rest the amorphic, non-specific concerns. How can I help Asian American students who are labeled as struggling explore their leadership values? How can medical educators, evaluators help push back or cause good trouble when these non-specific concerns are brought up? Dr. Pang, do you want to take this? You're the closest to to that. We're very much far from residency.
Sure. Actually, I think Dr. Belmonte almost answered the question in his statement. I think that, so for myself, I had those same things. It was like, oh, you need to talk up more. You need to be more aggressive. You need to be more assertive. And all of those things were compounded by the fact that not only was I Asian, but I was also a woman. So all those things were, those comments were doubled in surgery, as you can imagine. And so I think the biggest thing for me and what helped me overcome those kind of comments was mentorship, as you alluded to. I think having mentorship, having an example of leadership, having someone basically show you the way, because you want these students to be able, you don't want them to, you don't want just to be an example, you want to make them an example. So you want them to be able to speak up, you want them to be able to be leaders, but also be true to themselves. So I think that the biggest thing for these students, especially with those concerns, is to, I think it's twofold. So I think one is mentorship just for the students themselves. And I think how to push back to those concerns is to point out other qualities that the student has. If they say that the student is quiet or the student doesn't seem engaged, you could say that, well, you know, the student's presentation, it shows that they were very invested in this patient. It shows that they looked into this chart. They really invested themselves into doing this. And I think that using those examples and countering those comments is very important. But I think the other part of it is just like having mentorship and having leadership when it comes to those students. But thank you so much for that comment, Dr. Belmonte.
Does anybody else would like to chime in into that question?
Yeah. Oh, sorry, not that question. I was just going to build on the mentorship part. I think it's really important to have mentorship, like diverse mentorship. So, you know, different ethnic, diverse groups of people supporting you, because I think that's really the way forward. is that acceptance of different kinds of leadership styles and different diverse groups of people working together, so that it's not just, because I think I see Carla's comments in there as well, that, she heard a lot of similarities. I think a lot of us who are people of color have a lot of similarities in our upbringing and what we have experienced. So, how do we bring that together, the diverse groups, not just Asian, but also, Hispanic, Latino, Black, African American, Native American? How do we pull together, and say, hey, there is an experience also, like, even though we all have diverse experience, there's also an experience of what happens to people of color in institutions. And so I think it's really important for us to also say, hey, we offer a diverse alternative view of the world, and how can we all work together, and really, build from that. So just kind of thinking in terms of mentorship, having that diverse group of people to support you.
I think it's really awesome to have mentors who are nothing like yourself sometimes. One of my mentors, she describes herself as an angry Black woman. And she's very extroverted. So she's always, hands are flying, and she's very vocal. And it's not that I take her up on every suggestion, but that she provides me with an alternative that really makes me think.
Thank you, everybody. I can see that our panelists are also looking through the chat. I'm not able to get through all of these, but I agree, you don't have to have a mentor that's the same ethnicity as you. I think a strong woman as a model, that was really important. I think for myself, and to build our confidence. I think that's something that, I think for us growing up, sometimes we are quiet and we are taught not to brag. And sometimes that comes across as not being confident. So I do think that modeling and the mentoring is really helpful. And then I would say, we're coming together as an Asian culture to, I think, speak about some of the racism that maybe we have felt in our lives. But I do think, and I think, the panelists would agree with me, that we have to do this together with all cultures, African American, Native American. And so we really need to, come together, Hispanic culture, and really, look deep inside and work together to make these changes going forward. And thank you, everybody, for taking the noon hour to be with us today. We have one last session. I'm hoping you guys can also participate. That will be on Friday, right before Memorial Day. Take your lunch with us. We have one more that will be actually moderated by Dr. Subswami from Department of Pediatrics. And on that panel will be Dr. Matil from the College of Pharmacy, Dr. Pandey from Family and Community Medicine, and medical students have been. And so I think that will be also a very interesting session, and I hope you all can join. Thank you again for the panelists for taking your time and being part of the first inaugural Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month.
I would like to go ahead and extend also an invite to everybody for tomorrow's event. We actually have two left. Tomorrow's event, we have Dr. Ko from University of California, Davis, who will be speaking also at the noon hour. And then, of course, the Cultural 3 session. So please definitely visit the Celebrating Diversity website and you can register there.
And they're all recorded. So if you missed something, we have some really interesting history sessions. So please go to the website, and everything's recorded if you wanted to listen on sessions that you've missed. I think we can stick around a little bit longer if people have questions and they just want to pose to the speakers.
I just want to thank everyone, Dr.
Karen,
Kong, Dr. Cheng, Dr. Fang, just really so much appreciate this, and just as we continue to learn and just to hear these stories are very, I think they change us and they continue to make us realize what you just said, Dr. Kong's, so wonderful about how we all need to continue to work together. So thank you, and for being part of the, for our planning committee and everyone who really has helped make this a successful Heritage Month. We're just really happy we'll continue to be doing this every year, through the Health Sciences Center Office for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, but so important, and just a sincere thank you to everyone.
Thank you, Val. Yeah, thanks for giving us this opportunity. And I really appreciate, you listening to me too. So thank you.